The number of people out of work in Germany jumped more than expected this month, according to the latest government data. For May, 21,000 more people were no longer in the workforce. That is 4 times worse than what economists had expected, and it brings the total joblessness figure to just under 3 million for Germany. Bad weather has been blamed as many companies have limited operations and rehiring. There was one silver lining, though. Germany's jobless rate stayed at 6.9%, which is close to the lowest level seen since the country's reunification more than 2 decades ago. Alexander Herzog-Stein is the head of labor economics at Hans Bockler Foundation in Dusseldorf. He says that despite these numbers, they do seem bad this time around, given Europe's overall weakness. They were all but inevitable.
I think what we see now is finally that the effects of the European crisis are also becoming visible at the German labor market. They have been there already since last year, but so far they have been overshadowed by positive effects from Asia and from the United States. These positive effects have now gone, and the negative effects from Europe are now also slightly becoming visible on the German labor market.
I'm a little confused because I understand the positive effects coming from Asia, but I thought things were getting better in America and Asia at least the last couple of months, but perhaps I'm wrong about that. And the other question is, why such a long delay? This European crisis has been festering now for well over 2 years. I mean, if you want to include the financial crisis, even longer than that. Why did it take such a long delay before we actually saw some negative, more concerning data out of Germany?
You know, initially with the effect of the Great Recession, Germany was able, with a very flexible adjustment through working time, to adjust its employment without having to lay off people. So we were quite successful with that. And then, given that we didn't have to lay off people, when finally the global economy was growing again, Germany was able to participate from this positive effect. Then during the start of the European crisis, for a long time, Germany was able to compensate the negative effects coming from the partner countries in Europe by gaining from the trade with the United States, with China, and with South America. However, the slowdowns in these regions as well now made it more difficult for Germany. And in the last 2 quarters, we were struggling because the positive effects from there were not sufficient anymore.
We've had a number of economists come on our show specifically talking about Europe, how business confidence has stabilized, consumer confidence has stabilized, the crisis in Southern Europe seems to have abated for the time being. I mean, I'm reading that into a fairly positive note. I mean, you can tell because of the strength of the euro indicates that the crisis itself has abated. Now, that said, how do businesses feel? Because if they're not hiring folks, there's something else that's underlying that's concerning them. What do you think that is?
At the moment, you know, the confidence measures, which are quite economic soft measures, are indicating that we are stabilizing on a very low level, but we don't see it yet in the growth figures. Europe overall was declining. German growth was relatively disappointing in the first quarter of 2013. And traditionally, European labor markets are reacting with a lag to these growth effects. So therefore, that's what we see in the German labor market is quite what we see in the economic environment in the last 2 quarters.
So to solve the problem, it sounds like confidence needs to return and the labor market needs to perhaps be a little healthier. That said, my question is, does the labor market need to be better before businesses become confident, or is it the other way around?
No, where we need an improvement definitely is in the demand in Europe for our goods. We are suffering in Europe overall from the austerity measures, which we can observe in a lot of countries, which is harming demand for the goods in Europe. And this has negative effects for the labor market. So when we see that growth is finally picking up, then we can see positive effects on European labor markets, which are still deteriorating. If we look, for example, at Spain, at Greece, and other countries. So in that sense, Germany is at the moment still in a very favorable position, despite the slight increase in unemployment this month.
That was Alexander Herzog-Stein, economist with the Hans Bockler Foundation in Dusseldorf.